The late autumn air in Da Nang was refreshingly cool, with gentle breezes drifting in from the Han River, carrying a faint hint of sea salt. Hieu leaned against the balcony railing of his third-floor rented room, eyes fixed on the distant Dragon Bridge stretching majestically across the water. He had only been here for about a month, leaving his hometown in Dong Thap behind to start a new job, working as a technical supervisor for an electrical equipment company in Sun Tra district. That afternoon, Hieu received a text from Thang, a colleague from the company. "Seafood tonight? Might treat. To officially welcome you to the Brotherhood." Hieu chuckled softly and replied, "Okay, but where are we eating? I'm not familiar with the roads yet." Thang quickly sent him a location pin, Hong Bien Restaurant, along Hoang Sa Street. "Just follow the map and you'll get there." The dinner was cheerful and full of camaraderie. Stories about work mingled with friendly teasing, all accompanied by the steady rhythm of waves crashing on the shore. By the time they left, the night had deepened and the sea breeze had grown colder. Hieu rode his motorbike alone along the coastal road, which was quieter than usual. As he passed a narrow alley near Vo Nguyen Jop Street, he caught a glimpse of a figure leaning against a coconut tree. It was a young woman in a long white dress, her black hair flowing loose, her face hidden in the shadows. He slowed down slightly, glancing back for a second, but then rode on, assuming she was just a tourist or a local out for a walk. Yet, as soon as he passed her, a strange, icy draft brushed the back of his neck, sending an involuntary shiver through him. When he returned to his room, Hieu showered and lay down to rest. The sound of the waves still drifted faintly from afar, steady and rhythmic, almost like someone's quiet sigh. As he was dozing off, he suddenly heard the faint sound of footsteps in the hallway, slow, steady, as if someone was walking past his door. Hieu opened his eyes and sat up, listening intently. The footsteps stopped right in front of his room, paused for a few seconds, and then, knock, knock, knock. 3 knocks echoed against the door. He got up and opened it. The hallway was empty, only the sea breeze swept in, bringing with it a biting chill that made his skin prickle. Looking both ways, he saw no one at all. Clicking his tongue, he reassured himself. Probably someone knocked on the wrong door and left. But as he closed the door, he caught a faint whiff of a familiar scent, a kind of perfume oil he couldn't quite remember where he had smelled before. That night, Hieu dreamed he was standing on an empty beach. In the distance stood the silhouette of a woman in a white dress. Her back turned to him. He called out, "Hey, miss?" The woman slowly turned around. Her face was ghostly pale, her eyes deep and black as if they had no pupils. She smiled faintly, lips parting without making a sound. In that instant, a roaring wave surged forward, swallowing both her and Hieu whole. He jolted awake, cold sweat beading on his forehead. The clock read 3:15 a.m. outside. The wind still whispered through the door cracks. And once again, that faint scent of perfume crept into his nose. The next morning, pale golden sunlight streamed through the window, slanting across the surface of the old wooden table. Hieu sat in silence for a moment, a cup of coffee cooling in his hand. His mind lingered on last night's dream. The image of the girl in the white dress standing by the shore played in his head like a slow-motion film. Every detail painfully vivid. He shook his head slightly, reassuring himself. It's probably just because I ate late last night and got home tired. My mind was worn out, so I dreamed nonsense. His phone buzzed. A text from Thang. "Come with me to the construction site in Hua Hai this afternoon. I need an extra hand." Hieu replied simply, "Okay." That afternoon, they arrived together at the site, a seaside villa still under construction. The house was large but stood somewhat isolated, with a row of coconut trees leaning in front and an empty lot stretching toward the ocean in the back. As soon as Hieu stepped inside, a gust of sea breeze rushed past him, carrying that same scent he had smelled the night before. He froze, glancing around. The site was quiet, only a few workers mixing cement in the back. Thang was busy on the phone and didn't notice. Hieu walked toward the staircase, where the wind seemed to funnel through the strongest. A chill ran up his spine when he spotted something on the third step, small, damp patches, like wet footprints. They were small, delicate, the size and shape of a woman's feet. He was about to call out to Thang when a voice came from right behind him. Soft as a breath. Are you looking for me? Hieu spun around instantly. The hallway was empty, only the sound of the sea wind whistling through the unglazed window frames. That night, back in his rented room, Hieu tried to push the afternoon's incident out of his mind. He stretched out on the bed and turned on some soft music. Outside, Da Nang's autumn air was pleasant, and the sound of waves rolled in steady and calm. But that same perfume scent began to drift into the room again, even though the window was shut tight. He sat up abruptly, opened the door, and peered down the hallway. At the far end, under the dim flicker of a weak light bulb, he caught sight of a white figure standing perfectly still, slender frame, long hair covering the face. He took a step forward, and the figure slowly turned away, then vanished behind the corner. Hieu rushed toward it, but the hallway was empty. Only a cold wind sweeping through the long, narrow corridor. That night, he dreamed again. The same beach, the same girl in the white dress. But this time, she was closer, her deep black eyes fixed on him. Her voice carried as though from a great distance. Please, don't leave me, again. Hieu opened his mouth to ask, but a freezing hand suddenly grasped his own. The icy sensation spread through his body, jolting him awake. The clock once again read 3:15 a.m. Only this time, his hand still felt cold. Icy cold, like it was real. In the morning, Hieu sat in a seaside cafe. The glass of iced milk coffee in front of him had already melted halfway. Yet he hadn't taken a single sip. His eyes drifted toward the distant horizon, where silver waves crashed against the rocky shore, turning to frothy white. In his mind, the image of that cold, lifeless hand touching him last night kept replaying over and over. The sharp scrape of a chair startled him. Thang sat down across from him, leaning an elbow on the table. What's wrong with you? You look terrible today. Didn't sleep? Hieu nodded faintly, speaking softly. Yeah, I didn't sleep well. Felt like I was sleepwalking or something. Thang chuckled, shaking his head. Stop reading those ghost stories and you'll quit dreaming about them. Oh, by the way, someone asked us to clean up a room on the third floor of that villa from yesterday. Probably just dusty. Won't take long. A chill ran down Hieu's spine. That villa was exactly where he'd smelled that strange scent. But he said nothing, only took a slow sip of coffee, letting the bitter taste run down his throat. By noon, they arrived at the construction site. The owner, a thin, middle-aged man, handed them the keys and said, "That third floor room has been empty for a long time. Once you're done cleaning, lock it back up for me." His voice was hoarse, his gaze distant, as if he didn't want to linger there. Hieu and Thang climbed the stairs to the third floor. The door was stiff, and Thang had to push it open with his shoulder, sending a cloud of dust swirling into the air. Sunlight filtered in through a small window, revealing faded gray curtains and furniture buried under a thick layer of dust. The moment Hieu stepped inside, he caught it, the scent. Faint, but unmistakable. He swallowed hard, scanning the room. On the wall hung an old photograph, its glass dulled with age. But the image was still clear enough. A young woman in a white dress, standing on the shore. He called out quietly, "Thang, look at that." Thang, holding a broom, glanced up and frowned. Probably the owner when she was young. Just there for decoration. Nothing strange. But Hieu knew, the face in the picture was identical to the girl in his dreams. When Thang stepped out to get another trash bag, Hieu stood alone in the room. The ocean breeze whispered in, soft yet chilling. He heard it, the faint sound of footsteps behind him. His heart pounded as he slowly turned. In the corner, the curtain swayed gently. Behind the fabric, he caught the outline of a figure. A pale, white hand slowly pulled the curtain aside, revealing half a face, eyes black and hollow. Staring straight at him, Hieu stepped back, but his feet felt glued to the floor. That voice came again, low and sorrowful. "You promised me? Have you forgotten?" A sudden gust of wind blew the curtain wide open. When Hieu blinked, The corner was empty. That night, back at his rented room, Hieu searched online for any information about the villa. He found nothing, but when he opened the photo he had taken while cleaning, his blood ran cold. Behind him, right next to the curtain, was the clear image of a young woman in a white dress. Head bowed, her long hair covering her face. He grabbed his phone and shone its light around the room, the overwhelming feeling creeping in that someone was standing just outside his window. That night, Hieu sat at his desk, his phone still open to the photo taken in the third floor room. The yellow lamp cast a long shadow of him across the wall. Outside, the sound of ocean waves blended with the wind whistling through the cracks in the door. He kept telling himself it was just a trick of the light or some strange coincidence. But the cold shiver running down his spine refused to fade. From the window, he could see his shadow stretching down onto the street below, but wavering faintly beside it was another shadow. Hieu shot to his feet and yanked the curtain aside. Outside, the alley was pitch black, lit only by a weak yellow street lamp. No one was there. He gave a strained laugh. Guess my eyes are really playing tricks on me. The moment he turned away, there came a soft tapping on the glass behind him. Tap, 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 3 slow, steady knocks. Hieu spun around, pressing his face close to the pane. But the night outside was still empty. A gust of wind lifted the curtain, and that familiar scent slipped into the room again, sweet, yet chilling. The next morning, Thang showed up at his room holding a cup of hot coffee. "Hey, did you hear anything about that villa last night?" Hieu looked at him, puzzled. "What do you mean?" Thang sat down and lowered his voice. "The lady running the drink stand nearby said the previous owner had a daughter who died more than 10 years ago, drowned in the sea. Ever since, no one dares to stay in the third floor room." Hieu gripped his coffee cup tightly, asking quietly, "Do you know her name?" Thang shook his head. "Nobody dares to say it." That afternoon, Hieu returned to the villa alone. The owner wasn't there, just an envelope with the keys clipped to the door. The third floor was just as dark and silent as before. He stood in front of the photograph of the girl, staring for a long time. Suddenly, the glass turned cloudy, as if covered by a layer of mist. On that foggy surface, thin strokes began to appear, as though written by a finger from inside. "It's me." Hieu stepped back, heart pounding, but instead of running, he moved closer, his voice trembling. "What do you want?" Outside, the wind seemed to still. Then that voice, both familiar and distant, floated softly from the corner of the room. "Don't forget the promise at the beach that day." Hieu's head snapped up, but the corner was empty. Only the curtain swayed gently, and his shadow on the floor, now joined clearly by a second shadow standing beside him. He sank to the cold tile floor, his mind reeling. The promise at the beach that day. The words scraped at his memory, pulling him back to a distant afternoon. 10 years ago, just after graduating high school, Hieu had gone to Da Nang with a group of friends. It was his first time seeing the vast ocean, white-crested waves, salty wind stinging his skin. Among them was a strange girl, someone none of them knew. She introduced herself as Lan, saying she lived nearby. She had deep, bright eyes and a voice as gentle as the sea breeze. All afternoon, Hieu and Lan talked as if they had known each other for years. When the sunset turned the sky crimson, they sat together on a rocky outcrop. Lan smiled softly and said, "If one day I'm not here anymore, will you promise to come back to the sea and find me?" Hieu laughed. "How would I find you? What if you've gone far away?" Lan tilted her head, her eyes glinting like waves. "Just stand here, and I'll know." For reasons he couldn't explain, he nodded, more serious than he expected of himself. "Okay, I promise." The sound of the present-day waves pulled Hieu back to the third floor room. He whispered, "Lan." A sudden gust burst the window open, carrying that same scent, the exact one from that long-ago evening. From the photo, the girl's eyes seemed to glint faintly before fading. Then, a soft laugh echoed nearby. Hieu shot to his feet, scanning the room. "Is it really you, Lan?" No answer, only the sound of bare feet slapping softly on the stairs. Descending to the floor below, he bolted after it, The hallway stretched long and narrow. At the end was a door leading to the backyard. It was ajar, letting in a rush of cold wind. Outside lay a narrow path that led straight to the sea. He stepped out, his feet sinking into the damp sand. Far ahead, a white figure stood with her back to him, long hair streaming in the wind. "Lan," he called. The figure froze, then took a few slow steps toward the water's edge. When Hieu reached the spot, there was nothing left, only frothy white waves and that lingering scent on the breeze. In the sand at his feet, a small seashell had washed ashore. On its surface, faintly etched, were two words: "Keep promise." The next morning, Hieu woke with a restless ache in his chest. All night, the image of the white figure on the beach and the seashell carved with the words "Keep promise" had looped in his mind like a haunting melody that refused to stop. He decided he had to find out who Lan was, and what had happened to her. He began by walking along the narrow coastal path where the white figure had vanished the night before. Low, moss-covered tile roof houses stood close together. Their eaves hung with rows of drying fish. The salty tang of the sea mixed with the smoky scent of early morning cooking fires. An elderly woman sat mending a fishing net, her silver hair fine as silk, her eyes squinting in the sun. Hieu approached and gave a polite bow. "Hello, ma'am. I'm from out of town. I wanted to ask, years ago, there was a girl named Lan who lived near this beach. Do you know her?" The old woman stopped working and looked up. Her gaze flickered briefly before she slowly set the spool of thread aside. Her voice was husky and low. "Lan, why do you ask? That was a long time ago." Hieu hesitated. "I met her once. 10 years ago. And yesterday, I think I saw her on the beach." The woman stayed silent for a long while, as if weighing something, then sighed softly. "Come inside. This isn't something to talk about out here." Inside the small, cool house, the faint scent of lotus tea lingered in the air. She poured Hieu a cup before she began, her voice steady but distant, as though recalling an old wound. Lan was the youngest daughter of old Sao Luong, who lived at the end of the village. Pretty girl, gentle, well-liked by everyone. But that year, she fell in love with a man from somewhere else and ended up pregnant. He left her, and she was alone. Before the baby could even form, her family beat her and drove her away, saying she had brought shame to them. Her thin, wrinkled hands trembled slightly as she paused. They found Lan on the beach during a stormy night. Her body was lying right at the water's edge, hair tangled, eyes wide open. No one knows exactly how she died. But ever since, sometimes people see a girl in a white dress walking along the shore, or standing on the rocks. Staring out to sea, Hieu sat frozen, his hand tightening into a fist. He asked quickly, "Does anyone still live in Sao Luong's house?" The woman shook her head. "He died a few years back. The house has been abandoned. But you'd better stay away. Some kids say when they pass by at night, they hear a woman crying inside." Leaving her house, Hieu stood for a long while on the empty road. The sun had already broken through the clouds, but inside him hung a heavy, unmoving darkness. He remembered Lan's words from years ago, and the look in her eyes when she had said, "Just stand here, and I'll know." Hieu decided, tonight, he would go to that abandoned house. By late afternoon, Da Nang had settled into a calm after the harsh midday sun. The sea shifted into a deep shade of blue, the waves lapping softly like sighs. Hieu ate a quick bowl of mi kwang at a small shop at the head of the village, his mind replaying the old woman's story again and again. When darkness began to spread across the rooftops, he slipped on a light jacket, took a small flashlight, and quietly made his way to the village's end. The path grew narrower, lined with whispering coconut palms swaying in the wind. Finally, the house appeared, a decaying wooden structure with peeling paint, its shutters half closed like narrowed eyes watching him. He stopped at the gate and drew in a deep breath. At that moment, a gust from the sea swept in, carrying a faintly rancid, briny smell. The hinges of the front door gave a soft creak, even though he hadn't touched it. Hieu stepped inside, gravel crunching under his feet. The living room was coated in a thick layer of dust. The once white curtains were now tattered gray, shifting faintly with the breeze. On the table sat an upturned blue porcelain cup, beside a wall calendar frozen on October 12 years ago. He swept his flashlight over each corner. A crooked old photo hung on the wall. The girl in the picture was Lan, wearing a white owl dye, smiling gently, though her eyes seemed to hold a quiet sorrow. Then he heard it, a faint knocking somewhere. Tap, 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 slow and steady. He turned his flashlight toward the sound and saw that the door to the last bedroom down the hall was slightly ajar. Hieu swallowed hard and stepped closer. His hand touched the doorknob. It was ice cold, like needles pricking his skin. He pushed the door open, and the musty air rushed into his face. Inside was a small room. The bamboo bed still had its pillows and blankets, as if its owner had just left. On the bedside table stood an old oval mirror, its surface catching the flashlight's beam in a hazy reflection. In the mirror, Hieu saw his own image, but behind him, faint and shadowy, was a long-haired girl standing right in the doorway. He whipped around. The hallway was empty. Then came the sound of bare feet brushing against gritty sand. Right behind him, a soft female voice, like the wind slipping past his ear, whispered, "Why did you come here?" Hieu froze. He didn't dare turn his head. Instead, he answered softly, his voice trembling yet firm, "Because I promised I would find you." A long silence followed. Then the footsteps faded, leaving only the distant rumble of the waves. Hieu stepped into the hall, sweeping his light through the shadows. No one was there. But just as he was about to leave, the oval mirror in the bedroom turned ever so slightly on its own. And on its fogged surface, two words began to appear. "Don't go." Hieu stood before the wooden gate, one hinge broken, gripping his flashlight tightly. The words, "Don't go," still burned faintly in his mind, blurred, yet unshakable. He took a deep breath, telling himself, "If I leave now, I'll never understand what really happened to Lan." He stepped back inside the house and shut the creaking front door. The hinges screeched with a long, dry groan. The living room was dim, dust swirling in the thin shaft of light that slipped through the window. Hieu spotted an old wicker chair, wiped it off with his sleeve, and sat down. He listened to the steady rhythm of the waves outside, like a slow heartbeat. After a moment, his flashlight beam swept across a wooden cabinet against the wall. One drawer was slightly ajar. He walked over and pulled it open. Inside was a small tin box, its lid painted with faded flowers. When he opened it, he found a bundle of yellowed letters, carrying the faint scent of old paper and sea salt. He unfolded the first letter, the slanted handwriting soft and delicate. "Hieu, today I went to the sea alone. The waves were so big, but I still wanted to sit there. I don't know why, but every time I look at the sea, I feel as if someone is waiting for me. If you come back, find me there." In the corner, it was signed, Lan. A sudden tap, tap, tap echoed from above, steady, like footsteps across the ceiling. Hieu looked up. He hadn't even realized this house had an attic. He searched until he found a small folding wooden ladder propped in the kitchen corner. Flashlight in hand, he aimed it upward and saw the dark, cold gap of the attic hatch. Slowly, he set the ladder in place and climbed each rung. With every step, the wind outside seemed to whisper his name. When his hand touched the attic door, an icy chill sank into his bones. The hatch swung open. His beam swept across a cramped space draped in cobwebs. In the center was a long wooden chest, covered with a mold-stained white cloth. Hieu knelt and touched the cloth. Just as he was about to pull it away, a woman's voice breathed softly behind him. "Don't open it." He spun around, only darkness. His heart pounded, but he inhaled deeply and whispered, "Lan, I have to know the truth." The cloth slipped away, revealing a neatly folded white dress and a yellowed bridal veil. Beneath them was a photo album. The first picture showed Lan in a wedding dress, standing alone on the beach, and behind her was the figure of a tall man, his face completely obscured. Hieu turned to the next photo. Lan again stood on the shore, this time angled toward the shadowy figure. Her faint smile trembled, as though hiding fear. The more he looked, the more the dark figure seemed wrong, its outline blurred. its head tilted unnaturally, and its fingers were far too long, resting lightly against her veil. He shut the album and slipped it into his backpack. Descending the ladder, he left the house, following the sandy path back into the village. The night wind in Da Nang was both salty and cold, the waves merging with the gusts into a sound that gnawed at his thoughts. The next morning, Hieu visited Uncle Tam, said to be the oldest resident in the village. In his 70s, Uncle Tam's hair was white as clouds, his eyes still sharp, and his voice carried the deep tone of a life by the sea. He poured Hieu a cup of hot tea before asking slowly, "You're looking for land? Around here, no one's dared speak her name for years." Hieu nodded, keeping his tone steady. "I just want to know about this photograph." He placed the wedding photo on the table. Uncle Tam picked it up and squinted at it. His face paled slightly. "You see it, don't you? That's not a person. The villagers call it the waiting shadow. Anyone who takes a wedding photo on this beach with it behind them disappears within days or weeks." Hugh's grip tightened. "Lan was the same?" Uncle Tam was silent for a long moment before answering. "The day she died, the weather was perfect. After the photo shoot, she said she'd go to the sea alone. A few days later, all they found was her bridal veil washed ashore. Her body was never recovered." A sudden gust rattled the front door, its hinges creaking. Hieu glanced toward the alley and, for a fleeting moment, saw the hem of a white dress drifting past. That afternoon, Hieu returned to the beach to take photographs, hoping to compare the scenery and find clues. As he lifted the camera, he felt someone standing close behind him. A cold breath slid from the nape of his neck down his spine, along with a whisper that repeated softly, "Hieu, don't." He spun around, nothing. But on the camera's display, in the shot he had just taken, stood the faint, smoke-like figure of a tall man right behind him, and in the distance, a woman in a white dress walking slowly into the sea. Hieu sat on the porch of his lodging house, the cup of black coffee in front of him long gone cold. All afternoon, the image of the girl in the white dress and the man's shadow standing behind him kept replaying in his mind. He wondered if he had gone too far into something the villagers themselves avoided. The landlady, around 50, named Ms. Hua, stepped out and handed him a thin blanket. "The monsoon wind is strong tonight. Make sure you close your windows tight when you sleep. The sea's been rough these past few days. Strange things tend to happen." Her voice dropped lower on the last few words. Hieu looked up, keeping his tone casual. "Have you ever heard about the waiting shadow?" Ms. Hua hesitated, her gaze darting quickly toward the sea before turning away. "Don't ask about that. Knowing too much won't do you any good." She turned and went back inside, leaving Hieu with the emptiness of her unfinished answer. Night fell. The waves grew louder, pounding against the rocky shore like thousands of hands clapping in unison. Hieu lay listening, unable to sleep. Near midnight, he heard soft, measured footsteps outside in the hallway, bare feet against the floor. He crept to the door and peered through the wooden gap. Under the dim, flickering yellow light, a slender female figure in a white dress walked slowly toward the end of the hall, her long hair dripping wet. With each step, drops of water fell onto the tiles. Hieu switched on his flashlight and threw the door open, only to find the hallway empty. All that remained were a few wet patches leading down the stairs and disappearing. The next morning, he went to see Uncle Tam again. "Uncle, last night I saw a girl in a white dress. Her hair was wet. She was walking inside the guest house," he said, describing every detail. Uncle Tam's face darkened. "So, you've started seeing it? The villagers believe the waiting shadow only appears to those it's about to drag into the sea. You should leave Da Nang." Hieu stayed silent, but inside, the opposite feeling rose stronger. He knew he couldn't walk away now. If he left, everything would remain unanswered. He had to find out what happened to Lan, and what that shadow really was. That night, he decided to go to the beach alone. The monsoon wind whipped hard, sand stinging his face. In the vast darkness, foamy waves rolled in again and again. He lifted his camera and aimed it toward the sea. As the shutter clicked, he clearly heard footsteps behind him, heavier this time, more deliberate. A coarse male voice rasped right next to his ear. "Your turn." Hieu spun around, but saw only thick darkness and caught a strong, briny stench in his nose. He ran back toward the lodging house, heart pounding. Ms. Hua was still awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. She squinted at him. "Out at the beach at this hour? You're not afraid?" Breathing hard, Hieu told her everything, including the male voice at his ear. She stayed quiet for a long time before speaking softly, as if afraid someone might overhear. "They say, the waiting shadow isn't alone. It has a guide. The guide doesn't stay in the sea, it's on shore." Her words sent a chill up Hugh's spine. He was about to ask more when a voice called from outside. A middle-aged man, sun-darkened face, leaned on his bicycle. "Wah, come quick. Tin's been missing since this afternoon." The three of them hurried to the beach. On the sand, a group of villagers had gathered, flashlight beams darting in all directions. A pair of rubber sandals lay abandoned at the water's edge. Tin's mother sat collapsed in the sand, sobbing uncontrollably. Hieu asked a young man nearby, "Where did he go missing?" The young man swallowed hard. Said he was just going to get some nets, never came back. "We searched the whole beach, only found his sandals. When we shone the light out to sea, it looked like there was a shadow standing far out there." Before Hieu could ask more, a sudden gust blew out several flashlights. In the darkness, he heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps running on the sand, not toward the shore, but straight into the water. Then came the splash, tearing through the night. When the lights came back on, there was nothing, only widening ripples on the surface. That night, Hieu didn't sleep. He went through the photos he'd taken earlier that day. In the last frame, amid the gray water, a blurred face loomed close to the lens, deep black eyes that seemed to pull him in. He zoomed in, his chest tightening. The face was identical to Lan's. Hieu decided he had to go to the beach one last time. He told no one, just quietly slipped his camera into his bag, pulled on a windbreaker, and stepped out into the street as the clock struck 11 p.m. The road to the shore was so empty that his own footsteps sounded like they were echoing from somewhere far away. The salty tang of the wind slipped down his collar. Out beyond the breakers, the waves crashed in steady rhythm. But between those beats, Hieu could hear a low murmur, like someone softly calling his name. When he reached the beach, he stopped. On the sand, Lan stood with her back to him. Her long, wet hair clung to the back of an old white dress. Slowly, she turned, revealing eyes as dark and endless as a moonless night. Hieu clenched his fists and stepped forward. "Lan, it's really you, isn't it? Why are you here?" She didn't answer, only lifted her hand toward the sea. The tide had drawn back, revealing a narrow path of sand leading straight into the pitch-black water. He hesitated, but the sound of footsteps behind him made him glance back. Ms. Hua was standing there, her face tense. "Don't go. Hieu, you don't understand, that's not Lan anymore." Lan snapped her head around, her eyes flashing like they caught the moonlight. Her voice rang out, but it was nothing like the Lan he remembered, deeper, rougher, filled with a heavy sorrow. "You promised you'd take me home, and now you leave?" A fierce gust of wind swept through, the stench of salt and rot flooding the air. Hieu felt his feet sinking into the sand as if something was pulling him down. Lan stepped closer, each footprint sinking deep into the wet ground. Behind them, the waves no longer rolled evenly but broke apart, like hundreds of hands slapping the surface of the sea. Ms. Hua lunged forward, grabbing his arm, but at the same moment, another ice-cold hand closed around his wrist. Hieu spun. No one was there. Only Lan, now standing so close, whispering, "Come with me." Darkness swallowed his vision. The sound of waves, of wind, of voices calling faded, until everything fell silent. The next morning, they found Hieu's camera lying on the sand, still warm. The final photo showed a black stretch of ocean, and in the middle, a lone figure walking away until they vanished beneath the water. The drizzle began at dawn, a fine mist that clung to the air. Da Nang lay under a heavy gray sky, droplets beating on the window of Hieu's room. He opened his eyes, a biting cold rising from his feet. as if you were still standing barefoot on wet sand the night before. He couldn't remember exactly how he had made it home. All his memories ended at the moment Lan stood close, whispering in the roar of the waves. He tried to recall it, but the harder he thought, the more it felt like a fog had settled over everything. A knock came at the door, light but insistent. Hieu slowly got up and opened it. Ms. Hua, the woman who ran the drink stall at the alley's entrance, stood there in a thin raincoat, holding a paper bag. Her eyes were full of worry. Without giving him a chance to ask, she stepped inside and set the bag on the table. Eat some porridge to warm yourself. Last night, do you know what you just escaped from? Hieu sat, shaking his head. His voice was low and hoarse. I only remember, Lan was there. She said she wanted me to take her home. Ms. Hua pulled out a chair and sat across from him, her thin hands lacing together. Trembling slightly, she spoke slowly, as if each word might summon something closer. You have to understand, what you saw last night wasn't Lan anymore. Out here, we call it the waiting shadow, spirits that can't move on because they still have promises with the living. But those promises are almost always broken, so all they know is how to keep you from leaving. Hieu frowned, gripping the warm cup in front of him. But, I saw her clearly. Her voice, her eyes, it was all her. Ms. Hua met his gaze, her voice dropping lower. You don't get it. The sea knows how to borrow a face. Borrow the voice of the one you love most. It will call you, lure you, and when you follow, you never come back. A heavy silence settled between them. The rain outside pattered steadily, broken only by the drip-drip of water falling into a tin can under the eaves. From her coat pocket, Ms. Hua pulled out an old handkerchief and unfolded it to reveal a tarnished black coin, etched with strange symbols. She slid it toward him. Keep this with you. They say it was found by a fisherman on the seabed, and it can stop the waiting shadow from touching you. Hieu picked it up, the icy chill seeping into his palm. He was about to ask more, but Ms. Hua stood, slipped on her raincoat, and headed for the door. Before leaving, she said only one thing. If you still want to see Lan again, you need to find the truth, not the shadow. The door shut, leaving Hieu with a flood of questions and no answers. By afternoon, the rain had stopped. Hieu decided to return to the beach, this time with his camera. He wanted to capture the spot where he had seen Lan the night before. The wet sand glistened under the setting sun. The waves rolled in rhythm, but today there was no voice in them calling to him. He took several shots before heading back. That night, when he reviewed the photos, his chest tightened. In one image of the empty ocean, among the white-capped waves, stood a pale figure blending into the foam. Facing the shore, long hair, white dress, and eyes that seemed to stare directly into the lens. Hieu couldn't sleep. The black coin lay beside him, but the chill from the night before crept back. In his head, Ms. Hua's words echoed, find the truth, not the shadow. And he knew, that truth was somewhere close. Very close. The next morning, Hieu went to the small boat dock at the far end of the beach. Ms. Hua had once told him that if he truly wanted to know what had happened to Lan, he should ask the people who had worked the sea for many years. They looked at the waves differently from tourists, and sometimes, they heard calls that weren't meant for the living. The old ferryman she'd mentioned sat at the end of the dock. His small frame and sun-darkened skin weathered like old teak. In front of him, an aging boat was tied with a frayed rope. Hieu approached quietly and spoke. Hello, sir, I'd like to ask about someone named Lan. She died in this sea a little over a year ago. The old man lifted his head, his clouded eyes accustomed to gazing into the distance. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he lit a cigarette and drew in a long breath. The smoke drifted away on the sea breeze. Only then did he speak. Slowly. I remember. That day, the wind turned suddenly. The waves were rough. The girl was out at night with some friends. My boat was anchored nearby. I saw flashlights swaying back and forth. Then, only screams. And black water. Hieu clenched his fist, forcing his voice steady. Did you see her sink? The old man looked down at the water, his voice lowering. Not exactly. There was something, like a white arm pulling her under. Not a wave. A strong wave sweeps you away. But this, it held on. Dragged her straight down. His words cut through Hieu's mind like a blade. The image of Lan from the night before surged back, the icy hand gripping his wrist. The old man stubbed out his cigarette and went on. The villagers say that place used to be a burial ground during the war. Too many bodies, buried shallow. Later, the sea took over, and no one dared swim there at night anymore. But sometimes, people still hear the call. Hieu sat in silence, feeling the coin in his pocket grow heavier. He asked softly, "If I wanted to find her, what should I do?" The old man gave a dry chuckle. His smile lost in the wind. "You don't find it, it finds you. But when it comes, you'd better know whether you're meeting Lan, or the thing wearing her face." That night, Hieu returned to his room and tried to piece the fragments together. Ms. Ho's talk of the waiting shadow, the old man's white arm and the graves swallowed by the sea. Both pointed to one truth. Lan might not have truly moved on. But she was no longer the person he once knew. The phone on the table buzzed. A message appeared from an unknown number. "Do you still want to see me?" No one else, only Lan, had ever called him, and that way. His fingers trembled as he typed a reply. "Where are you?" Seconds later, the answer came. "The place where the waves first touched your feet." That night, Hieu took the coin with him and walked to the beach. The pale moon hung low, its light shimmering across the water. The waves lapped in a slow, steady rhythm, as if waiting for him. Amid the silver water, a white figure slowly emerged. No longer far away like before, this time, Lan stood right at the edge of the waves. Her wet hair plastered to her face. She smiled, her voice slipping into his ear like the wind. "I've been waiting for you for so long." Hieu's feet touched the water. Ice cold. The coin in his pocket turned frigid. But Lan's eyes held him still. He barely had time to hear the crash of a huge wave, before everything fell into darkness. Hieu opened his eyes to a dim, bluish light, not from an electric lamp or the moon, but as if it were filtering through deep water. Around him, every sound was heavy and muffled, and the only thing he could clearly hear was the pounding of his own heartbeat in his chest. He was underwater, yet strangely, his body felt no urge to gasp for air. The water caressed his skin, icy to the point of numbness, but it didn't crush his lungs. Lan stood before him, her white dress drifting gently with the current, her black hair floating like strands of seaweed. She smiled and reached out her hand. "Come with me, it's peaceful here, no one will ever hurt you again." Her voice didn't come from her lips, it resonated directly inside Hieu's mind. He lifted his hand to take hers, but just as his fingers were about to touch, the coin in his pocket burned hot, as if fresh from a forge. A faint light spread from it, gently pushing his body backward. Lan hesitated, the deep black of her eyes flashing with a trace of silver. The gentle smile vanished, replaced by a soundless fury. Her hair fanned out like living vines, wrapping around Hieu's arm. He struggled, but the more he fought, the tighter it constricted. He screamed, but his voice dissolved into a cloud of bubbles. Then a memory flashed, the ferryman's words. "You have to know whether it's really Lan, or something wearing her shape." The eyes before him, though identical to Lan's, were hollow, cold, and predatory. Gritting his teeth, Hieu yanked the coin from his pocket and clenched it tight. This time, the light flared brighter, forcing the black strands to recoil. Lan, or the shadow wearing her face, was driven back. Her features twisting, lips stretched wide in a silent, drawn-out scream. Hieu could only feel the violent vibration of the water around him. Then everything went dark. Hieu woke on the wet sand, chest heaving as if he had sprinted a great distance. Ms. Hua sat beside him, a bundle of wormwood in her hand, her face etched with worry. "You're lucky you're alive. If the ferryman hadn't come to tell me, your body would already be drifting far out by now." Hieu coughed violently, his voice rasping. Did you see her?" Ms. Hua shook her head, eyes fixed on the dark sea. "I only saw the waves. But where you were lying, the sand was ice cold. That's the mark of the dead just standing there." Her words sent a shiver down Hieu's spine. He reached into his pocket. The coin was still there, but its silver had blackened along the edges. as if it had been corroded. Ms. Hua spoke slowly, each word heavy. If you want to see Lan again, you'll need to prepare more. That thing has started to recognize the coin. Next time, it'll try to take it from you. Hieu sat in silence, listening to the steady rhythm of the waves. He knew he couldn't stop, not when Lan, or at least some part of her, was still down there. 3 nights later, the sea grew unnaturally calm. There was no sound of waves crashing hard against the shore, only the faint whisper of the wind, as if murmuring secrets to itself. Hieu sat in his rented room, the coin resting on the table. Nearly half of it had darkened, the black edge creeping inward. Whenever the wind blew in from the sea, the coin quivered, giving off a faint clink-clink sound, like metal knocking together deep underwater. Ms. Hua arrived, placing a small glass jar filled with cloudy water in front of him. This water comes from the old well in the village cemetery. Drink it before going into the sea. It will help you tell the difference between the living and the shadow. But remember, if that thing looks straight into your eyes for 3 beats, turn away immediately. No one survives past the 3rd beat. Hieu nodded. He didn't speak, but in his heart, he had already decided, this time, he would go down there to find Lan himself, instead of waiting to be dragged under. At midnight, the sky was hidden beneath heavy clouds. Hieu gripped the coin, swallowed all the water from the jar, and stepped into the icy waves. With every step forward, the sound of the wind onshore grew more distant, replaced by a deep, constant hum in his ears. Beneath the surface, a pale blue light appeared, not from the moon, but from dozens of figures drifting weightlessly. Their eyes were wide and blank, their hands reaching toward him. From the center of them emerged a white figure, Lan. This time, her smile was no longer gentle, but almost welcoming. You finally decided to come. Her voice filled the water around him, not needing to move her lips. Hieu gripped the coin, feeling it grow hot in his palm, but he didn't back away. I came to take you home. Lan tilted her head, her black hair spreading out like smoke, while the figures behind her began to close in, the circle tightening. From deep below came a heavy sound, like a funeral drum echoing through the water. She reached out her hand. The coin in Hieu's grip trembled violently, and this time, it whispered to him, "If you take her hand, you will never return." Hieu stood surrounded by the drifting figures, the water so cold it stung his skin. Lan's hand remained outstretched, her smile widening, her black eyes glinting faintly. His heart pounded. He remembered Ms. Hua's warning, if it looks into your eyes for 3 beats, you must turn away. Lan drew closer, her gaze locked with his. 1st beat. The world around him fell silent, leaving only the pounding in his head, as if invisible hands were pressing hard against his temples. 2nd beat. Deep within Lan's pupils, an image appeared, not of the sea, but of a dark room, the floor mottled with bloodstains, and Hieu himself, kneeling there. 3rd beat began. Hieu felt his body being pulled forward, as though he was about to be swallowed into those eyes. In that instant, Lan's entire face changed. Her skin turned ashen gray, lips bruised purple, hair matted like seaweed. Behind her, no longer human shapes, but dozens of skeletal hands reaching out. In a desperate reflex, Hieu clenched the coin and spun toward the faint light above. A monstrous force seized his legs. Colder than stone, he thrashed violently, the coin burning hot enough to scorch his palm. Suddenly, the water ahead flared with light, sweeping him upward as if struck by a massive wave. Hieu burst through the surface, coughing and choking. On shore, Ms. Hua and the ferryman were waiting. They pulled him up, faces tense. "How many beats did it look at you?" Ms. Hua asked urgently. 2, almost 3. Hieu panted. Ms. Hua was silent for a long moment, then said, "Then it won't let you go again. From now on, you not only have to find a way to save Lan, you have to save yourself before the 3rd beat truly comes." In Hieu's hand, the coin was now almost completely blackened, with only a small circle of light remaining in the center. He knew time was running out. The sea wind whipped against his face, and the waves slammed into the rocks like someone pounding on a door over and over. Hieu wore only a thin jacket. In his pocket was the scorched coin, now nothing more than a faint rim of tarnished metal. Ms. Hua stood beside him, holding a hurricane lamp. The wavering yellow light cast deep shadows on her gaunt face. Her voice rough and strained. "Tonight is the closing moon. The boundary is at its weakest. If you're going to act, it has to be tonight." Hieu's voice trembled. "If I save Lan, I'll be free too, right?" Ms. Hua shook her head slightly. "Not certain, but if you don't try, you'll both be taken." They walked along the rocky path to the tip of the coast. According to Ms. Hua, this was where the sea met an underwater cave, the place where Lan's body had once been found. As they stepped inside, the air grew heavy, pressing down like an unseen weight. In the darkness, the sound of dripping water echoed, each drop seeming to stretch into minutes. From her bag, Ms. Hua pulled out a red cloth. Laying it on the damp stone floor, she placed a bowl of seawater and a small candle on top. "When the candle burns down, you must call her name 3 times. Look straight into her eyes, but this time, don't be afraid. If you are, it'll take you instantly." The candle's flame flickered to life, weak, but steady. In Hieu's mind, images of Lan became vivid again, their first meeting at the shore. Her gentle smile, eyes both sad and warm. Outside, the waves fell silent. In their place came the sound of footsteps in shallow water, slow, deliberate, drawing nearer. Lan emerged from the shadows. This time, she didn't bear the monstrous look from beneath the sea. She was the same girl in the white dress he remembered. The only difference, her eyes reflected no candlelight, only an unfathomable void. Hieu swallowed hard, his voice steady. "Lan, I've come back. I'm taking you home." She smiled but said nothing. Ms. Hua's voice urged him. "Look into its eyes." He obeyed. In them, he saw a cramped room, the smell of damp and rust, rope biting into Lan's wrists, and a man standing behind her. His face was blurred, but his laugh was unmistakable, the voice Lan had once told him she feared. The candlelight wavered. As Hieu reached out, blackened hands erupted around Lan, yanking her toward the shadows. "No!" Hieu shouted, lunging forward, his hand plunging into ice-cold water. The candle went out. The cave was swallowed in pitch black, leaving only the pounding of Hieu's heart and the ragged breathing of someone close to his ear. Hieu jolted upright, gasping. No waves, no wind, just a vast whiteness around him, dense like heavy fog. Beneath his feet was not rock or sand, but a still, icy surface of water that faintly mirrored his own reflection. "You've come," Lan's voice carried from afar, both a whisper and an echo from all sides. He turned. She stood there, long hair loose, eyes deep and endless. This time, there were no black hands holding her. He stepped forward, keeping his voice calm. "I'll take you back, but you have to tell me what happened to you that day." Lan lowered her gaze. Behind her, the mist began to swirl, revealing a scene like an old film reel, a rotting wooden room. The smell of mildew, the sound of the sea wind hissing through cracks. She was bound, gagged, and the man, a tall, broad-shouldered figure with a long scar down one cheek, stood watching her. He was from the fishing village. He said, if I didn't go with him, he'd drown me. Her voice shook, but her eyes blazed with resolve. I tried to escape, but the image shifted. Screams, the crash of water, a shadow shoved forward, falling into the sea. Lan's body was dragged with it, swallowed by the dark waves. Hieu's fists clenched. You were forced, then left to drown? She nodded faintly. The mist thinned until only the two of them remained in the endless white. She looked at him, her eyes glistening. If you want to bring me back, you have to find him. My soul is bound by the one who killed me. A low hum rose, and the water beneath them rippled. From a distance, the scarred man stepped forward, his eyes glowing red like embers. His voice was rough. You think you can take her? She's mine, forever. Lan stepped back, but Hieu moved in front of her. You killed her. I won't let you keep her another second. The man laughed, the sound echoing through the endless white. The water around them transformed into massive black waves, surging to swallow them both. Lan shouted, Hieu, if you stay, you'll never get out. A freezing hand gripped his wrist from behind, yanking him backward. Hieu stumbled, turning, Ms. Hua was there. "Run, this is your only chance," she shouted, her eyes tight with worry. As she dragged him away, Hieu glanced back. Lan stood with her arms outstretched toward him, her lips moving to form words he couldn't hear, before the black waves swallowed everything. Hieu opened his eyes, his entire body soaked, lying on the seawall in Da Nang. The night was cold, the sea wind howled, and far away, the waves still rolled in steadily as if nothing had happened. He tried to sit up, his head spinning. On his right hand, the bruise shaped like fingers was still imprinted, Lan's hand. A sound of footsteps came from behind. Hieu turned, and there, under the dim, yellowed streetlight, a man stepped out of the shadows. A long scar on his cheek peeked out from beneath his cap. "You looking for me?" he said, his voice low, dragging like it scraped along the wet sand. Hieu stood up, taking slow steps forward. "You killed her. I'm turning you over to the police." The man gave a mocking chuckle, stepping closer, his breath thick with alcohol and the salt of the sea. "Police? You think I'm scared? She was mine long ago. The body under the sea, it's still there. Want to see it?" A chill ran down Hugh's spine. "You'll pay for this." He clenched his fists. Before the man could respond, the sea wind suddenly roared, carrying a damp, icy cold. The streetlight flickered, then went out. In the darkness, Hieu heard the rush of water slapping against the seawall. But tonight the waves were strangely high. A pale hand rose from the edge of the seawall, clutching the man's leg. The man panicked. "Let go, Lan, let go." Hieu stepped back, eyes wide. From the shadows, Lan emerged, her hair dripping wet, her black eyes unfathomably deep. She said nothing, only pulled him slowly toward the sea. He screamed, punched, kicked, but each wave seemed to have an invisible force, binding him tight. Within seconds, both vanished into the black water. The sea grew calm again, only the cold wind whistling across the seawall. Hieu stood frozen, his heart pounding. He wanted to believe he had dreamed it all. But at his feet lay a soaked cap. He bent down to pick it up. But suddenly, an icy drop of water slid down the back of his neck. He spun around, no one was there. Far out at sea, the figure of a young woman stood upon the water. Neither sinking nor drifting, she looked at him, smiled faintly, and dissolved into the sea mist. 3 years later, Da Nang, a July night, a group of young tourists gathered on the beach, blasting music from a portable speaker, drinking beer, laughing loudly. One girl from the group ran down to the water's edge, calling out, "Hey, watch me take a picture here." She held up her phone. Back facing the sea, the waves lapped gently. In the screen, the distant city lights shimmered. She snapped several shots in quick succession. When her friends came over to look, one suddenly frowned. Who's that standing behind you?" The girl laughed. "You're kidding, it was just me the whole time." But in the photo, right behind her, was the figure of a woman with long, soaking hair, standing close, her deep black eyes staring straight into the lens. None of them noticed that far out at sea, small ripples were slowly gathering into a long, straight line, as if the ocean was waiting for someone to step in.